Yeah, they were drunk, but they were drunk on government alcohol. And when they finally sobered up, right, we realized what a mess we made, and now we've got a lot of mistakes we've got to purge from the system. That's the recession. The recession is actually the good part. It's painful. It's kind of like the withdrawal symptoms for somebody who's got an alcohol problem. You want to kick the habit, you got to go through withdrawal. So we have to go through a withdrawal from cheap money. We have to stop, doing these foolish things. We have to go back to a sensible economy. We have to start saving our money. We have to start producing things. We have to start investing. We just can't keep borrowing money from the Chinese and using it to buy imported products. That's not how economies work. That's not how economies grow. You don't borrow and spend yourself into wealth. You borrow and spend yourself into poverty, which unfortunately is what we've done. And we need government to understand that it's their stimulus. We stimulated our way into this crisis. And my fear is we are now stimulating our way into a much bigger crisis. Because there is always a trade-off. There's always a payback. Politicians can only see as far as the next election. And what they're looking for is not a permanent fix, but a temporary fix that'll get by the next election. But whenever they do that, all they do is exacerbate the problems. I mean, the following downturn is that much worse. So what happened in 2008, that was the payback for the Bush and Greenspan stimulus. We got 6 years of phony prosperity as we borrowed trillions of dollars from the rest of the world, and we went on a consumption binge. And now we're paying the price for that. If we continue on this path, if we continue to stimulate and try to artificially encourage more debt and more consumption and a bigger government, we're headed for a much bigger crisis in the next few years. And it's going to take the form of a currency crisis where it's going to be the value of our money that collapses. So we're not going to be worried about losing money on bad investments or having our banks fail and there's no money there. The problem is going to be the money is still there, but we can't buy anything with it because it's collapsed in value because we've printed so much of it. The real secret to economic growth, if we really want to stimulate this economy, we have to figure out what's in its way. What are the roadblocks preventing economic growth and remove them? And the roadblocks are coming from government. They just had a seminar in Washington. Barack Obama gathered people together to try to figure out how we can create jobs. Well, government can't create jobs, but it can do a good job of destroying them or preventing them from being created. I told you that I started my company in my one-bedroom apartment. I couldn't even do that today. It's impossible. And the reason I couldn't do it is because the regulatory burden on the brokerage industry has grown so much since I started that I could never afford it. I think right now I have 6 people. We just hired a brand new person. I didn't even know they started in compliance. I've got a whole team of people that do nothing but comply with government regulations that are absolutely meaningless. They do nothing to protect investors. All these regulations were here, yet Bernie Madoff still managed to pull off a gigantic Ponzi scheme. They do nothing but run up the cost. It would be impossible for a young man to start his own brokerage firm unless he had a very wealthy parent to fund it. It would just no way to do it. And all this regulation does is act as a barrier to entry so that these larger firms that everybody bailed out, all these too big to fail firms, they don't have to worry about competition from the little guy because the little guy can't overcome this barrier to entry. If we're going to have job growth in this country, we have to understand where jobs come from, because they don't come from government. They come from 2 things. They come from profits and they come from capital. And without those, you have no jobs. You need a profit motive because no one's going to hire anybody, if they can't make a buck off of it. Everybody isn't an altruist. Businessmen hire other people because their employees help them make money. But of course, they need to give them tools. They need capital. You can't hire somebody if you don't have tools to give them, if you don't have computers or an office or a machine or something. Because what creates jobs is a businessman's capital combined with somebody else's labor. So what we need for job creation is profits and capital. But unfortunately, everything that we're doing in Washington is undermining capital formation. They're taxing capital. They're chasing it out of the country. Our interest rates are too low. We're creating too many dollars. We're undermining the value of our dollar. Foreigners don't want to invest here because they're going to lose money. And Americans don't want to keep their capital here because they're going to lose it. So if we really want to turn this thing around and avoid a much bigger economic collapse, which I know is coming, we've got to turn this around. And I think there's a real ideological battle going on right now in Washington. And we've got to win that battle. It's between Barack Obama and all the academics that he's brought into his administration, I'm not even sure if anybody in Washington ever run a business. You have all these academics who are really socialists who think that they could micromanage the economy. They think that because they're smarter and they care more than all the other socialists that used to be in China or used to be in Russia or in anywhere else they are, they think they can do it better. They think that government should determine how resources are allocated, which businesses succeed, which businesses fail. Nobody up there understands capitalism or how it works. And so we need to win this battle. We need to send people to the United States Senate that understand economics and that understand capitalism and understand the Constitution and understand what the role of government is and how this country got so rich in the first place. You know, at the end of the Bush administration, the mantra was, we have to abandon capitalism. There's a crisis and we can't afford to stick to these principles when there's an emergency. Well, during good times, that's when you can afford all these government mistakes. Because you're rich. It's okay if government does something stupid. It'd be better if they didn't, but at least you can afford it. But when times are tough, when you're in as big a hole as we are, we need capitalism more than ever. We can't resort to these government programs because it'll drive the economy into such a deep hole that we'll never be able to get out of it. Their philosophy is we need to spend more money. Well, but we're broke from spending too much money. How can spending more money possibly help us? If you lost your job and you went home to your wife and said, I just lost my job, and she said, well, great, let's take a vacation. Or let's put it in a swimming pool. How is that possibly going to help? We need to do the opposite of what we did to get into this crisis. So we need to roll up our sleeves and we need to start working again. We can't keep buying stuff. We can't keep borrowing money. We don't want Americans buying more houses or buying more cars. We got enough cars. We built enough houses. We need to produce stuff so that we can export, so that we can earn money and get out of debt. And we don't want to expand government. We want to contract government. And we want to repeal all those rules and regulations that are distorting the free market and that are causing all this misallocation of resources in the first place. And we need to start thinking about the long term. We can't think about the next election. We have to think about, the next 10 elections or 20 elections. What is going to cause lasting economic prosperity? Not a quick fix, not more of the stimulus, but a return to free market principles. And that's what I'm going to do if I go to the U.S. Senate. And I've told other people I'm not a career politician. I'm not looking to make the Senate a career like Chris Dodd did. I'm not going to be there for 30 years. I want to go there just long enough to try to affect some real change, and then I want to leave. And I'm hoping that by going to Congress, in 2010, that this will empower other candidates to come out of the private sector and run in 2012. Because career politicians will never solve these problems. It is impossible. As I said, all they care about is getting reelected. But if people like me can come out of the private sector and temporarily go to government and try to correct the mistakes of the politicians, and that's all I want to do. I don't want to write new legislation. I want to repeal existing legislation. Pretty much every piece of legislation I introduce is just going to be one page, because it's just going to be to repeal something and to try to abolish all these foolish policies that are already in existence and try to restore free markets so that we can be more competitive. If we have lower taxes, if we have less regulation than everybody else, we'll be able to compete. We can't do it now. We can't be the high tax, high regulation, inflation society where we just debase our money and then go deeper into debt. So if I go into the government, that is going to change. And I'm going to try to educate each and every other member of the United States Senate, member of the House of Representatives. Maybe the president will listen to me. They certainly didn't listen to me as a private citizen. I can talk till I'm blue in the face on cable television, and nobody cared. But maybe if I'm standing on the Senate floor filibustering everything that Barack Obama wants to do, maybe he'll start to pay attention to me. Anyway, I thank everybody for their support. If you want to learn about my campaign, you can go to my website, which is schiffforsenate.com. I just opened my campaign headquarters in Milford last week. I've got an official grand opening party Thursday night. It's from 6 to 9. And if anybody wants to be there, the details of where it is and when it is are on my website at schiffforsenate.com. Anyway, if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. In a white shirt.
2 questions. One is on regulation. Some people say that inadequate regulation on credit default swaps was a lot of the fuel for the bubble. So that's just to the point of whether or not there's inadequate regulation. the other thing is on spending. Bernanke's supposed to be a renowned person on depressions, and I understand a lot of economists that are of a like mind and say that if we didn't spend money, we would be in worse shape.
Yeah, there's a lot of economists who believe in Keynesianism, and it's